I pulled my coat tighter as I walked down Wall Street in downtown Asheville, the winter air cutting against my skin. The glow of the marketplace spilled across the sidewalk, a place I had chosen, carefully elegant enough for my father's 60th birthday, but not flashy. Inside, I oversaw every detail: the wine, the flowers, even the way the silverware caught the light. For years, I had been the one wiring money for medical bills, repairs, tuition, keeping my family afloat while I lived in a tiny apartment with secondhand chairs. Tonight was supposed to be different. Tucked in my purse was a velvet box with the watch my dad once admired, a gift that cost more than I could afford. Still, I believed it was worth it. If it meant this night might finally remind us that we weren't just a family in name, we could feel like one again. Growing up in Asheville, my world stretched from the winding Blue Ridge Parkway to the cracked sidewalks outside our modest home. But inside those four walls, everything revolved around my two brothers. Julian, the oldest, carried the crown. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and gifted on the football field, the kind of son small towns bragged about. Every Friday night under the stadium lights, he was the star, and my mother's voice carried proudly across the bleachers. His touchdowns were not just his victories, they were hers, proof that she had raised someone destined for greatness. Then there was Damon, the youngest. He was quick-witted, easygoing, and endlessly forgiven. Every missed assignment turned into a funny story, every broken rule smoothed over by his charm. Teachers overlooked his half-finished homework, and my mother excused his late nights with nothing more than a shake of her head and a smile. And then there was me, Celine. Quiet, bookish, the daughter who preferred the library over the football field or the stage. My report cards came back with straight A's, but the praise was faint, always followed by a qualifier. She's smart, but not a natural leader like Julian. She's focused, but Damon has such charisma. Each comment carved a mark, leaving me with the unshakable feeling that no matter what I achieved, I would always be measured against my brothers and found lacking. The recession of 2008 changed everything, though it didn't alter the way my family saw me. I was 15 when I first watched my parents whisper over bills at the kitchen table. My father's hands, rough from construction work, clenched and unclenched, as if the calluses themselves carried the weight of unpaid debts. My mother's face grew more lined, her eyes shadowed with worry. That year, while Julian talked about scholarships and Damon dreamed about playing guitar in coffee shops, I made a different choice. I decided to study finance. Numbers didn't play favorites. They didn't praise one sibling while dismissing the other. They offered order, rules, and a kind of fairness my household never seemed to know. I started working part-time at a diner after school, sliding plates of fried chicken and sweet tea across tables while scribbling notes on napkins for my economics homework during breaks. Every dollar went into a jar I kept hidden in the back of my closet. It wasn't just about saving for college. It was about creating a safety net for a family that seemed to teeter on the edge of collapse. By 16, I was covering small expenses, a utility bill here, a car repair there. My parents accepted the money with a mix of gratitude and guilt, but deep down, I hoped each sacrifice bought me something more: recognition, maybe even belonging. Julian continued to shine. Recruiters came to our games, handing him letters of intent. My mother boasted to neighbors about his future, her pride swelling with each mention of a potential scholarship. Damon, ever the charmer, skated by with his easy grin, turning mistakes into stories that made people laugh instead of scold. And me? I was invisible, except when the family needed something practical. Math tutoring for Damon, grocery money for the week, or an extra shift covered at work so my parents could catch a break. It wasn't that I didn't love them. I did. But love in our house seemed conditional, wrapped in touchdowns and charm. I thought if I poured enough of myself into carrying the family's burdens, they might see me not just as the quiet daughter with her head in books, but as someone essential. So I studied harder, saved more, and worked until my feet ached. I told myself that discipline was my ticket out of invisibility. When other teenagers spent summers at the lake, I was stacking shifts at the diner, memorizing stock market trends on my breaks. When my classmates bought new clothes with birthday money, I was stashing away tips in an envelope labeled emergency. I believed that if I could help shoulder the family's weight, maybe my mother would finally look at me with the same pride she reserved for Julian. Maybe my father would see that reliability could be just as valuable as charisma. But the truth settled slowly, like dust in the corners of our home. No matter how much I gave, no matter how hard I worked, the spotlight never shifted. Julian remained the golden boy, Damon the charming baby, and I, the overlooked daughter, remained on the sidelines, carrying the weight quietly, waiting for a kind of acknowledgement that never came. Still, I kept going. Each sacrifice felt like an investment, a down payment on a future where my efforts would finally be recognized. When the world outside collapsed during the recession, I told myself I could be the glue holding us together. Yet beneath that resolve, a quiet ache grew. The fear that I was only buying my place at the table, and that without my sacrifices, my seat might vanish altogether. By the time I left for college at UNC Chapel Hill, I thought I was stepping into a new chapter, one where my hard work would finally pay off. I had earned a scholarship that covered tuition and books, and I pieced together the rest by tutoring freshmen in economics and interning at a local investment firm. It wasn't glamorous, but it kept me afloat. My roommate spent weekends out on Franklin Street, sipping cocktails and laughing under neon lights, while I worked late shifts in the library, convincing myself that discipline was the key to freedom. Then came the first phone call. My father's truck, the one he relied on for construction jobs, had broken down. The repair shop quoted $500. He told me not to worry if I couldn't help, but I wired the money that same night. It meant skipping the textbooks I had budgeted for, but I told myself family came first. 2 months later, my mother called about an unexpected medical bill. $300 this time, with the familiar promise, "We'll pay you back." Of course, they never did. When Damon's community college tuition came due, he needed $2,000 to stay enrolled. I covered that too, working extra hours and stretching every dollar just to make it possible. I thought my sacrifices would be recognized, maybe even appreciated. Instead, it became routine. I was the one they called, the safety net they leaned on without hesitation. By my senior year, nearly half of my internship salary was being sent back to Asheville. After graduation, I landed a job as a financial analyst in Charlotte. The starting salary felt solid, more than I had ever earned before, and for a brief moment, I believed things might finally settle. Instead, the requests multiplied. When Dad's chest pains led to surgery, the bills were staggering. Insurance covered some, but not nearly enough. I emptied my savings $18,000 and still took out a personal loan to make up the difference. Later, when the mortgage teetered on default, I sent $12,000 over the course of 2 years just to keep the house from slipping away. Then came Julian's truck, repossessed after he fell behind on payments. I helped cover that too, Damon's tuition, again. Another few $1,000s that vanished into promises of a future he never finished. Every time, I told myself I was keeping the family together, that my sacrifices proved my love, but each withdrawal from my account felt like it was erasing another piece of me. My own life shrank into something painfully small. I lived in a studio apartment furnished with secondhand chairs. My car was a Honda on its last legs, coughing and wheezing through every commute. I bought groceries in bulk, stretching meals with beans and rice, convincing myself that this was temporary, that the sacrifices were worth it. Meanwhile, every time I drove back to Asheville, I noticed the quiet comforts my family enjoyed: new appliances in the kitchen, takeout containers stacked on the counter, small luxuries that didn't match the constant cries for help. I tried not to resent it, but resentment has a way of seeping in through the cracks. I would listen to Damon brag about a weekend trip with friends, or Julian laugh about a purchase he couldn't really afford, and something inside me would twist. I was the one skipping dinners out, the one saying no to vacations, the one tightening my belt so they wouldn't have to. And yet, I was never celebrated, never thanked in the way that mattered. To them, it wasn't generosity anymore, it was expectation. Somewhere along the way, I stopped being their daughter and sister. I became the family ATM, the one they turned to when things went wrong, the one they leaned on when bills piled up, the one who always found a way to make it work. And the worst part was, I let them. I believed that love meant sacrifice, that giving meant belonging. I thought if I carried enough of the weight, I would finally earn the seat at the table I had always longed for. But late at night, lying awake in my tiny apartment, I began to wonder if I had it backward. Maybe the truth was harsher. Maybe I wasn't buying love or belonging. Maybe I was just financing their comfort at the cost of my own life. The thought was too painful to hold on to for long, so I buried it under more work, more hours, more sacrifices. I told myself that one day it would all be worth it, that one day they would look at me and see not just a provider, but a daughter who mattered. Still, deep down, I knew the truth. I was carrying a family that never once thought to carry me. The night of my father's 60th birthday should have been a celebration. I had planned every detail down to the placement of the flowers, wanting it to be perfect, wanting for once to feel like more than the forgotten daughter. The restaurant's private dining room glowed with soft lighting against the brick walls. Candles flickered gently, and the Cabernet I had chosen rested on the table, waiting for Dad's approval. When he saw the label, his face lit up, and for a moment, it almost felt like my sacrifices had been worth it. We exchanged gifts, one by one. Julian handed over a polo shirt and a woodworking book, simple but thoughtful. Damon slid a framed fishing photo across the table, a memory captured in glass. Dad accepted both warmly, smiling with pride. Then I pushed forward the velvet box I had kept tucked by my side. His eyes widened when the Omega watch caught the light. He had admired it years ago in a store window, never expecting to own it. As I helped fasten the strap around his wrist, his voice thickened. "It's perfect," he whispered. And for one fleeting second, I felt like I truly belonged at that table. But belonging has always been fragile in my family. Julian's smile tightened, his eyes shadowed by something sharp and unspoken. Damon gave a low whistle, half joking, half envious. "That must have cost a fortune," he muttered, and the air shifted. My mother's expression hardened, her lips pressed thin, her eyes waiting for the right moment to strike. It didn't take long. As we ordered appetizers, she leaned back in her chair, her smile stretched too tight. "Not everyone can afford places like this," she said, her gaze fixed on me. But I suppose when you're single with no responsibilities, it's easy to be generous. Julian chuckled, raising his glass, and Damon joined in with a laugh that cut deeper than it should have. My face burned, but I swallowed the wine instead of my anger. Dad tried to steer the conversation toward lighter memories, stories from old job sites, but the reprieve was brief. Mom tilted her head, her voice dripping with false sweetness. Celine, you must be logging 60-hour weeks to keep up with your lifestyle. No wonder you don't have time for real life. Her pause lingered like smoke. Some people get so obsessed with money they forget about warmth. The laughter that followed was easy for them. Casual, like this was nothing more than a family joke. Julian leaned toward Damon, smirking. Remember how she used to make spreadsheets for her allowance? He said. She was 10 going on 40. Damon grinned. Still is. Only now the spreadsheets are for her bank account. I pressed my hands together beneath the table, nails digging into my palms. I had wired thousands to these very people. Money that kept roofs over their heads, cars on the road, and bills from drowning them. And still, here I was, reduced to a punchline. Dad tried again, louder this time, recounting a woodworking project, but his voice faded beneath their laughter. Then came the blow I hadn't braced for. Mom leaned forward, her wineglass poised delicately in her hand, her voice sharp enough to slice through the air. Marcus was right, you know. A man doesn't want to compete with numbers and deadlines forever. My chest tightened, the breakup still raw, the wound still open. To hear his name turned into a weapon at that table left me reeling. The candles flickered, shadows stretching long across their faces, and I wondered if anyone else in the restaurant could sense what was happening, that this wasn't light-hearted teasing but cruelty dressed up as banter. The meal dragged on like a series of small battles. Every achievement I mentioned was twisted into arrogance. Every word I spoke was met with a smirk or an eye roll. And then, as if all the little cuts weren't enough, my mother delivered the line that shattered the night. She leaned back, her voice steady, her chin tilted in triumph. "It doesn't matter what she buys," she said. "She's not even part of this family." For a heartbeat, silence fell over the table. Even the clatter of dishes from the main dining room seemed to stop at the door. The waiter froze with a tray in his hands, unsure whether to approach. The words echoed in my ears, unraveling years of sacrifice in a single instant. My father's face went pale, stricken between disbelief and loyalty. Julian stared into his glass of water, unwilling to meet my eyes. Damon's smirk faltered into something closer to fear. I sat there, my hands trembling beneath the table, but my face held still, my breath measured. Inside, something cracked open, a rupture I knew could never be mended. For years, I had carried them, hoping it would earn me love, respect, a place that was mine. But in that moment, I understood the truth. No gift, no sacrifice, no sleepless night would ever be enough. To them, I would always be the outsider, the one who gave but never belonged. And yet, even as the weight of their words pressed down, a strange calm settled over me. My mother's smirk lingered, but when I lifted my glass and steadied my voice, I could see curiosity flicker in her eyes. She didn't know it yet, but something had shifted. For the first time, I wasn't swallowing the pain. I was preparing to speak. The words hung in the air. "You're not even part of this family," echoing louder than the clink of glasses or the muted chatter outside the private dining room. My pulse hammered, but my face stayed calm. I lifted my wine glass, the stem cool between my fingers, and forced a faint smile. When I finally spoke, my voice was steady, carrying down the length of the table. "Perfect," I said. "Then don't ask me for any more money." The silence that followed was sharper than any insult. For once, no one laughed. My mother's smirk faltered, and even Julian shifted uneasily in his chair. Damon looked down, his grin gone, as though my words had pulled the ground out from under him. My father opened his mouth, but no sound came. It was as if the weight of my sentence had knocked the air from the room. I set my glass down and folded my hands, letting the truth roll out, each number like a hammer striking the table. 18,000 for Dad's surgery. 12,000 to cover the mortgage these past 2 years. 8,000 when Julian's car was repossessed. 6,000 for Damon's tuition that he never finished. 4,000 for the new roof. 3,000 for the furnace repair last winter. I paused, letting each figure land where it belonged, squarely in front of the people who had treated me like a stranger. Damon's face drained of color. Julian's shoulders slumped, and even Dad's eyes widened in shock. My mother tried to keep her chin high, but the triumph in her expression was slipping, draining into something closer to panic. "And tonight," I added, sweeping my hand toward the plates, the flowers, the Cabernet they had been sipping so carelessly. $350 for this dinner, paid for by the daughter who apparently doesn't belong. For years, I had carried the ledger silently, each sacrifice tucked away like a receipt I couldn't throw out. Tonight, I laid it bare, stripping away the illusion of love built on dependency. The words sat heavy in the space between us, undeniable and unerasable. My mother's lips parted, but no sound came. For once, she had nothing sharp enough to pierce the truth. The waiter approached, hesitant, as if he could feel the tension pressing against the brick walls. Without looking at my family, I reached for the bill and slid my credit card inside the folder. "Actually," I said softly, but firmly, "bring me a separate check. Just mine." Dad's head snapped up. "Celine, don't!" His voice cracked, half plea, half command, but I didn't look at him. I kept my eyes on the waiter until he nodded and walked away. My brothers shifted in their seats, avoiding my gaze, suddenly fascinated by the silverware and candlelight. My mother's face had lost all its color, her hand gripping the stem of her glass as though it might steady her. When the slip returned, I signed it quickly, leaving a generous tip for the server who had witnessed more than he bargained for. My share, my dinner, my wine, nothing more. Sliding the pen back into place, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders, the kind of release I had been chasing for years. I stood slowly, slipping my purse over my shoulder. For a moment, I let my eyes sweep across the table. Their faces looked smaller now, diminished by the truth they had tried so hard to bury. They couldn't joke their way out of it, couldn't disguise it as playful banter. The ledger was out in the open, and with it, the story of who I had been to them. Not a daughter, not a sister, but a bank account they could drain. "Enjoy the rest of the evening," I said, my voice calm, almost kind. And then I turned and walked out. The air outside bit against my skin, sharp and clean. Asheville's streets stretched before me, lit by street lamps and the glow of storefronts. For the first time in years, the weight on my chest eased. My steps grew lighter as I moved farther from the restaurant, each one peeling away another layer of obligation. The night was cold, but inside I felt something unfamiliar, freedom. By the time I reached Charlotte later that night, my phone was buzzing relentlessly. Voicemails piled up. Dad pleading. Julian insisting we could fix things. Damon half joking but desperate. Then came the final message. My mother's voice thick but steady. "Celine," she said, I shouldn't have said what I did. But you can't just walk away. We can't keep up the mortgage without your help. Your father's medical bills aren't finished. The credit cards are maxed. You know we need you. I let the phone fall silent on the counter. Her words echoed louder than all the others, not because they revealed love, but because they revealed the truth. They didn't need me as family. They needed me as survival. And in that realization came my final act of defiance. For once, I chose myself. In the months that followed, their voices grew quieter without my constant rescue. My father found small consulting jobs. Julian was finally forced to set a budget, and Damon traded late nights for steady pay. They survived, but they had to stand on their own for the first time. And I, for once, learned what freedom felt like. I took a trip I had always postponed, walking the beaches of Maui with nothing but the sound of waves for company. It was there I realized I hadn't lost a family I had discovered myself. A year later, my mother's letter arrived. In shaky handwriting, she admitted her bitterness, her jealousy, and her fear of being left behind. She asked not for money, but for a second chance. When I finally returned for another dinner, the air was different. My brothers contributed. My father added what he could. And for the first time, the weight wasn't on my shoulders. We raised our glasses as equals. Family isn't built on dollar amounts. It's built on respect, on love that doesn't come with a receipt. If this story spoke to you, share your thoughts below. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful journeys like this one.